The doctor's hands were shaking. I watched her stare at my file, not the ultrasound screen where my baby's heartbeat flickered in black and white. No, she was staring at the paperwork, at my husband's name printed in neat letters on the top of the page. Then she turned off the monitor, just switched it off mid-exam like someone had pulled a plug on my entire life. "Mrs. Mercer," she said, and her voice was barely a whisper, "I need to speak with you privately. Right now." She led me to her office, closed the door, locked it. I thought something was wrong with the baby. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Then she said words that made my world collapse. "You need to leave your husband today before you go home. Get a divorce lawyer first." I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. "What? Why? We're having a baby together. We're happy. I don't understand." "That's exactly the problem." Her face was white as paper. "What I'm about to show you will change everything you think you know about your marriage. But let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand how I ended up in that office, 4 months pregnant, learning my entire life was built on lies, told by the man sleeping next to me every night. My name is Daphne Wilson. I'm 32 years old. I work as a marketing director at a boutique firm in Connecticut, and I come from what people politely call old money. My grandmother, Eleanor, passed away 5 years ago and left me her estate, about $2.3 million in a trust, plus the historic Wilson family home, where 5 generations of women had lived, loved, and raised their children. I never flaunted it. I worked hard at my own career. I drove a 10-year-old Subaru and bought my coffee at the same place every morning. The inheritance was security, not identity, but it made me a target. I just didn't know it yet. I met Grant Mercer 4 years ago at my family's annual charity gala. The Wilsons had hosted it for decades. That year, I was standing at the bar trying to escape a conversation with a man who'd asked about my financial situation within 3 minutes of meeting me. Subtle, right? Then Grant appeared. Tall, dark hair, easy smile. He asked what I was drinking, made a joke about the terrible jazz band, didn't mention money once. He claimed to be just a financial advisor who'd gotten a last-minute invitation from a colleague. He said he had no idea who the Wilson family was. Looking back, that should have been my first red flag. A financial advisor who doesn't research the host family of a major charity event? That's like a chef showing up to a cooking competition saying, "Oh, we're making food today?" Had no idea. But I was tired of obvious gold diggers, and here was this charming man asking about my favorite books instead of my bank account. We dated for a year. Grant was attentive, thoughtful, remembered the smallest details. He insisted on paying for dinners even though I could have bought the restaurant. He seemed so genuine. My mother, Vivian, saw through him immediately. After their first meeting, she pulled me aside. "That man's smile doesn't reach his eyes," she said. "Something's wrong with him, Daphne. I can feel it." I told her she was being paranoid, overprotective, jealous even. We fought about Grant constantly. Eventually, we just stopped talking. 2 years of near silence between me and the woman who raised me. Birthday texts and nothing more. All because I chose to believe my husband over my own mother. Spoiler alert, Mom was right, and she's been waiting patiently to say, "I told you so." At this point, she's absolutely earned it. Grant and I got married after a year of dating. Beautiful ceremony at my grandmother's estate. He cried during his vows, tears streaming down his face as he promised to love and protect me forever. Looking back, those were probably the most honest tears he ever shed. Not from joy, from relief. His long game was finally paying off. After 2 years of trying for a baby naturally, we saw a fertility specialist. The diagnosis hit like a truck. Grant had severe male factor infertility. His sperm count was almost non-existent, and what little he had barely moved. Natural conception was essentially impossible. Grant seemed devastated. He cried in the car for 20 minutes. He apologized over and over like it was his personal failure. I comforted him, told him we'd figure it out together. That's what marriage was about. What I didn't know was that Grant wasn't crying from grief. He was crying because his plan had just gotten significantly more complicated. All that emotion was him recalculating, not mourning. We decided on IVF with a specialized procedure called ICSI, where doctors inject a single sperm directly into an egg, our best chance. Grant insisted on researching clinics himself, found one he said was perfect, handled all the paperwork. At the time, I thought he was being supportive because I was so emotionally drained. The first cycle failed. Devastating. I couldn't get out of bed for 3 days. Grant held me, whispered encouragement, promised we'd try again. The second cycle, 7 months ago, worked. Positive pregnancy test. 2 pink lines that changed everything. I cried happy tears. Grant held me close, already talking about nursery colors and baby names and the future he'd always dreamed of. Then, casually, he mentioned I should update my will. Now that we're a family, he said. I thought it was sweet, practical, the kind of thing a good husband thinks about. I had no idea he was already counting my grandmother's money as his own. Everything seemed perfect. The loving husband, the baby on the way, the life I dreamed about since I was a little girl playing with dolls in my grandmother's garden. I had no idea that in just 3 months, a stranger with trembling hands would show me documents that would burn my perfect life to ashes. And I had no idea that the fire had been set by the man sleeping next to me every single night. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single comment and it truly means the world to me. Now, back to the story. 4 months pregnant and something had shifted in my marriage. Small things at first. The kind of things you notice but explain away because the alternative is too painful to consider. Grant started keeping his phone face down on every surface. New password I didn't know. He'd step outside to take calls, come back saying it was work stuff, and change the subject before I could ask questions. He claimed he was restructuring client portfolios during these late-night calls at 11 p.m. on a Saturday. Now, I'm no financial expert, but I'm pretty sure the stock market takes weekends off. Unless Grant had secret clients in Tokyo, which he definitely did not, something else was going on. The late nights at the office multiplied. 3 times a week, sometimes 4. He wouldn't come home until midnight. He's a financial advisor, not an emergency room surgeon. What could possibly require that kind of schedule? I found receipts. A restaurant downtown I'd never been to. $280 for dinner for 2. A hotel in the city. 40 minutes from our house. Why would my husband need a hotel room so close to home? When I asked, Grant had answers for everything. Smooth, practiced answers that came just a little too quickly. Client dinner. Important networking. The hotel was for a conference that ran late, and it just made more sense to stay over than drive home exhausted. And when I pushed harder, when I asked more questions, his tone changed. Daphne, you're being paranoid. It's the hormones. My mother warned me about this. Women get irrational during pregnancy. Don't turn into one of those wives. I felt ashamed for even asking. That's how good he was at this. He made me apologize for questioning him. The financial pressure intensified around the same time. Grant's requests about money became more frequent, more urgent, more creative. We should add me to your trust. What if something happens during delivery? I need to be able to access funds for the baby. It's just practical. Power of attorney is common sense. Every married couple does it. Unless you don't trust me? Your grandmother's house is too big for us anyway. We should sell it. Invest the money properly. I know exactly which funds would maximize our returns. The man wanted me to sell my grandmother's home and let him invest the proceeds. This is the same man who insisted we needed 3 different streaming services because he couldn't remember which one had his shows. That's who I should trust with $2 million. Absolutely not. When I said no, gently and carefully, Grant's warmth evaporated. He became cold, distant. He started sleeping on the far edge of the bed, claiming I moved too much now that I was pregnant. The arguments became more frequent. He'd bring up the trust I'd refuse. He'd give me the silent treatment for days. His silent treatments lasted exactly until he got hungry. Funny how that worked. Apparently his principles had a time limit, and that limit was an empty stomach. He barely touched me anymore. Blamed my changing body. Said he didn't want to hurt the baby. It sounded caring on the surface. It felt like rejection in my bones. I tried to talk to him about it. He said I was being needy, hormonal, difficult. I started to wonder if the problem was me. One night, I woke up at 2 a.m. and Grant wasn't in bed. I found him in the kitchen, hunched over his phone, speaking in a hushed voice. I stood in the hallway and listened. "It's almost time," he was saying. "By spring, everything will be settled. Just need to wait until—" He saw me and hung up immediately. "Work emergency," he said. "Go back to sleep, honey." I didn't ask who has work emergencies at 2 a.m. about things being settled by spring. I was too tired, too pregnant, too desperate to believe my marriage was still okay. My best friend Tara came over for lunch the following week. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and watched me make excuse after excuse for Grant, his stress, his work pressure, his adjustment to becoming a father. Finally, she put down her fork and looked at me with those eyes that had known me since college. "Daff, listen to yourself. When's the last time you talked to your mom?" I didn't answer. "When's the last time Grant was actually happy to see you? Not performing happy, not putting on a show for other people. Really genuinely happy to see you walk through the door?" I couldn't answer that either. "Trust your gut," Tara said. "Something is wrong here." I told her she was being dramatic, but that night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Grant's phone, always face down, his late nights, his sudden obsession with getting access to my money, the way he looked at me sometimes when he thought I wasn't paying attention, like I was a math problem to solve, not a person to love, 4 months pregnant. Regular OB appointment for an ultrasound. My usual doctor was on vacation, so I was scheduled with a colleague instead, Dr. Claire Brennan. I went alone. Grant had a client meeting he absolutely couldn't miss. Standard appointment, nothing special. I laid back on the exam table, cold gel on my belly, waiting to see my baby dancing on the screen like always. Dr. Brennan was pleasant and professional. She made small talk while setting up the equipment, asked how I was feeling, if the baby was moving much, all the normal questions. Then she opened my file, glanced at the paperwork. Her face changed. She looked at my husband's name, looked at me, back at the name. I saw her hands start to tremble. She set down the ultrasound wand, reached over, and turned off the monitor completely. "Mrs. Mercer," she said, and her voice was barely above a whisper. "I need to speak with you, privately, right now." I thought something was wrong with the baby. Every worst-case scenario flooded my mind in 3 seconds flat. She walked me to her office, closed the door, locked it behind us, and then she said words that cracked my entire world wide open. "I know what your husband did, and I have proof." She pulled a folder from her desk drawer. Her hands were still shaking as she opened it. "My younger sister works at your fertility clinic," she said. 3 weeks ago, she came to me crying. She told me everything. When I saw your husband's name on your file just now, I recognized it immediately." Dr. Brennan took a deep breath. "Mrs. Mercer, I'm so sorry, but you need to see this before you go home, before he knows that you know." She laid the folder open on her desk between us, and everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my pregnancy, and the man I loved turned to ash right in front of my eyes. Dr. Claire Brennan's younger sister, Molly, worked as a nurse at the fertility clinic, the same clinic my husband had so carefully researched for our IVF treatment, the clinic he insisted was perfect for us. Now I understood why he'd been so particular about that choice. Claire explained everything, her voice steady even though her hands weren't. 3 weeks earlier, Molly had shown up at Claire's apartment close to midnight. She was sobbing so hard she could barely speak. She hadn't been sleeping. She'd lost weight. The guilt had been eating her alive for months, and she finally couldn't carry it anymore. 7 months ago, Molly told her, a patient's husband had approached her at the clinic. He was charming, well-dressed, seemed desperate, but reasonable. He said he had a special situation that required discretion. His wife didn't know, he explained, but he was using donor sperm for their IVF cycle. Some family genetic issue he didn't want to burden her with. Nothing sinister. He just needed help keeping it quiet. He'd pay well for the assistance, $30,000. For a nurse making $52,000 a year, drowning in student loans and credit card debt, it was impossible to refuse. Molly helped switch the samples. Grant's sperm, which couldn't have produced a pregnancy anyway, was replaced with sperm from a paid donor. The embryologist was in on it too. Grant had approached him separately with another payment. Between the two of them, the switch went undetected. The embryologist told Molly not to worry. "The husband knows what he's doing. It's not our business what arrangements married couples make." but it ate at Molly, especially when she saw in the clinic records that the pregnancy was successful. Somewhere out there was a woman carrying a baby she believed was her husband's child, and it wasn't. The guilt destroyed her. She couldn't look at herself in the mirror. She called in sick constantly. She started having panic attacks at work. 3 weeks ago, she finally broke. She told Claire everything. I sat in that office listening to Dr. Brennan explain how my husband had spent $50,000 to frame me for cheating on him. $50,000. That's more than he spent on our entire wedding, including the honeymoon. I guess I finally knew where his real priorities had always been, and they definitely weren't the open bar. But there was more, so much more. Claire laid out the complete scheme. The plan Grant had been building piece by piece for over a year. Phase 1 was already complete. Bribe the clinic staff, switch the sperm samples, make sure everyone stays quiet. Phase 2 was also complete. Wait for a successful pregnancy, play the devoted, excited father-to-be, build the perfect image. Phase 3 was planned for after the baby was born. Grant was going to have the embryologist alter the clinic records. The paperwork would be changed to show that our second IVF cycle failed. That way, it would appear we had conceived naturally afterward. Phase 4 was the trap. After the birth, Grant planned to suggest a DNA test. He'd frame it as something sweet and sentimental, proof of fatherhood to hang in the nursery, a celebration of our family. And Phase 5 was the kill shot. When the DNA test proved he wasn't the biological father, and when the medical records showed we had conceived naturally, he would have all the evidence he needed. His wife had cheated on him. The baby wasn't his. He was the victim. Our prenup had an infidelity clause. This is common in wealthy families, protects the assets. If one spouse cheats, they owe the other spouse $500,000 in penalties, plus the cheating spouse forfeits any claim to the other's property, plus the wronged spouse can sue for additional emotional damages. Grant's endgame was crystal clear. He would walk away with $500,000 minimum, he'd destroy my reputation, he'd probably get more in a lawsuit, and I would have been so devastated, so confused, so desperate to protect my child that I wouldn't have fought back effectively. He was counting on my shame to make me compliant. He almost got away with it. Dr. Brennan pulled more documents from the folder. Molly had saved everything. Original sample records showing the switch, the donor's ID number, payment records that could be traced to accounts Grant controlled. There were even email communications between Grant and the embryologist. They thought they were being clever, using personal email accounts and vague language. But there was enough, more than enough. Molly had also tracked down the donor. His name was Derek Sykes, a 28-year-old graduate student who'd been paid $15,000 in cash. Normal sperm donation pays maybe $100, sometimes $200. $15,000 should have been a massive red flag, but student loans don't pay themselves. Derek was told it was a private arrangement for a couple who wanted extra discretion. He had no idea he was part of a fraud. When he found out, he was furious and willing to cooperate. There was one more thing, Claire said carefully, something her own research had uncovered. Grant Mercer had $180,000 in gambling debts. He'd been gambling for years. Online poker, sports betting, casino trips he'd told me were business conferences, all while pretending to be a responsible financial advisor with his life perfectly together. And the money for the bribes, the $50,000 he'd paid to corrupt my IVF and frame me for adultery, he'd embezzled it. From his own clients, small amounts over time, carefully hidden in the accounting. His firm had no idea, yet. Grant wasn't just trying to steal my inheritance. He was a drowning man grabbing at anything within reach. His gambling debts were crushing him. The people he owed money to weren't patient bankers. They were the kind of people who don't file lawsuits when you don't pay. I was supposed to be his life raft. My grandmother's money was supposed to save him. And he was willing to destroy me completely to get it. I sat in that office for a long time. The papers spread out in front of me, the truth burning a hole in my chest. Shock came first, cold, paralyzing shock, then disbelief. I kept reading the documents over and over, looking for some mistake, some misunderstanding that would make everything okay again. Then the pieces started clicking together. The late nights, the secret phone calls, his obsession with accessing my money, his careful, calculated attention when we were dating. He'd researched me before we ever met. The charity gala where we accidentally bumped into each other wasn't an accident at all. He knew exactly who I was and what I was worth before he ever said hello. The way he cried at our wedding, those tears I thought came from joy. They were tears of relief. His long con was finally paying off. And my mother, Vivian, who I'd pushed away for 2 years, who I'd called paranoid and jealous and overprotective. She'd seen through him in 5 minutes. His smile doesn't reach his eyes. She tried to warn me. I chose him over her. I thought about crying. I thought about screaming. I thought about driving home and confronting him, throwing those papers in his face, watching him scramble to explain. But then something else happened. Something cold settled into my stomach. Something sharp and focused and absolutely calm. He thought I was stupid. He'd built this entire scheme on the assumption that I would crumble, that when his trap sprung, I'd be so devastated by the proof of my infidelity that I'd hand over whatever he wanted just to make it stop. He thought I was weak. He thought I was naive. He thought I was an easy mark. He had no idea who he'd married. I looked at Dr. Brennan. He doesn't know that I know. No, my sister hasn't told anyone else. And I only connected you to the case when I saw your file today. Good. I gathered the documents carefully. I need copies of everything. And I need you to connect me with Molly directly. What are you going to do? I stood up. My hand rested on my belly, on the baby who was completely innocent in all of this, a child who didn't choose their biology, a child I already loved, regardless of DNA tests or donor IDs, or any of the ugliness swirling around their existence. My husband thinks he's been playing chess, I said. He thinks he's 3 moves ahead. He thinks he's already won. I straightened my shoulders. He's about to find out I already flipped the board. I drove home from that appointment with my face carefully neutral, hands steady on the wheel, breathing even, just in case. Grant had installed security cameras around our house 2 years ago. At the time, he said it was for protection. Now I wondered if it was surveillance, if he watched the footage, if he was tracking my expressions, my movements, looking for any sign that I suspected something. So I gave him nothing. He was waiting when I got home, standing in the kitchen with that smile that didn't reach his eyes. My mother's words echoed in my head, 2 years too late. "How was the appointment?" he asked. "Is the baby okay?" I smiled back, walked over and hugged him, showed him the ultrasound photo Dr. Brennan had printed before everything changed. "Perfect," I said. "Everything's absolutely perfect. I deserve an Oscar for that performance." I smiled at him over dinner while mentally calculating how much his bail would be. I asked about his day while picturing him in an orange jumpsuit. I even laughed at his joke about baby names. It wasn't funny at all, but I committed to the role like my life depended on it. Because in a way, it did. I apologized for being paranoid lately, blamed the hormones, used the exact same excuse he'd thrown at me for months. His whole body relaxed when he heard it. The tension in his shoulders melted away. He thought he was still winning. He thought his plan was still on track. That night, he slept soundly beside me. I lay awake until 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, planning his destruction. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Then I drove 2 hours to a different city, checking my mirrors constantly to make sure I wasn't followed. Paranoid? Maybe. But I'd earned that paranoia. I found a private investigator named Rosalind Weaver, ex-police detective, 15 years on the force before going private. No-nonsense attitude, sharp eyes, the kind of woman who'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by any of it. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, took notes, and when I finished, she smiled like a shark who'd just spotted a bleeding swimmer. "Your husband made a lot of mistakes," she said. "Arrogant men always do. Give me 2 weeks." She had results in 10 days. Grant's gambling debts totaled $180,000. He owed money to online betting sites, underground poker games, and a few private lenders who definitely didn't file paperwork with the IRS, the kind of creditors who get very creative when payments are late. The embezzlement was confirmed. Approximately $53,000 missing from client accounts at his firm, siphoned over 18 months through small transactions designed to avoid detection. His bosses had no idea, yet. And then there was the affair. 8 months. His assistant, hotel rooms, romantic dinners, weekend getaways disguised as business trips. Rosalind had photos, text messages, credit card receipts, the whole pathetic collection. His assistant. Of course it was his assistant. How completely unoriginal. I was almost insulted by the cliché. If you're going to destroy your marriage, at least show some creativity. Having an affair with your assistant is literally chapter 1 of the Cheating Husband Handbook. Not that such a handbook exists, but if it did, Grant would have highlighted that page. Rosalind found something else too. This wasn't Grant's first attempt at landing a wealthy woman. 5 years ago, he'd dated someone in Boston. Caroline Ashford, family money, trust fund, the whole package. They were together for 8 months before she discovered financial irregularities in a joint account he'd convinced her to open. She ended things immediately, but was too embarrassed to press charges. Rosalind tracked her down. Caroline was more than willing to provide a statement now. She'd always regretted letting him walk away clean. I met with Molly Brennan in secret, a coffee shop an hour from town where nobody would recognize either of us. She looked terrible. Thin, pale, dark circles under her eyes. The guilt had been eating her alive. She started crying the moment she saw me sit down. "I'm so sorry," she kept saying. "I knew it was wrong. The money, and he was so convincing, and I thought maybe he really was just trying to protect you from some genetic issue," and I stopped her. "I need to know one thing. Are you willing to testify? Officially? On the record?" She nodded without hesitation. "I'll tell them everything. I should have gone to the police the day after it happened. I was just so scared of losing my license, my job, everything. But yes, whatever you need, I'll say it under oath." I looked at her for a long moment. This woman had helped my husband try to destroy me. She'd taken $30,000 to participate in fraud. By any measure, she was complicit. But Grant had manipulated her the same way he'd manipulated me. He'd found her weakness and exploited it. He was the architect. She was just a tool. "Don't be scared anymore," I told her. "You're not the villain in this story. He is." The embryologist, once he learned Molly was cooperating and had kept records, developed a sudden and convenient conscience. He gave his own statement to Rosalind. He was terrified of losing his medical license and going to prison. He'd say whatever we needed to put Grant away. The hardest call I made was to my mother. 2 years of near silence. 2 years of choosing Grant over her. I'd defended him when she questioned his motives. I'd stopped inviting her to holidays. I'd called her jealous, paranoid, unable to accept that I was happy. And she'd been right about everything. The phone rang twice before she picked up. "Daphne?" Her voice was cautious, hopeful, like she'd been waiting for this call for 2 years but didn't want to jinx it. "Mom!" My voice cracked on the word. "You were right. About everything. About him. And I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." There was a pause. I braced myself for the "I told you so" she'd earned, for the anger, the resentment, the hurt I'd caused by choosing a con man over the woman who raised me. Instead, she said, "What do you need, sweetheart?" She didn't gloat. She didn't remind me of every warning I'd ignored. She didn't point out that she'd tried to tell me for years. She just asked how she could help. That broke me more than anything else had. My mother is a retired attorney, specialized in estate law for 30 years before she stepped back. Within 48 hours, she'd connected me with the best divorce lawyer in Connecticut and a criminal prosecutor who specialized in fraud cases. My mom taught me something that day. The people who really love you don't need to be right. They just need you to be okay. I'd spent 2 years choosing a con man over the woman who raised me, and her first instinct when I called crying was still to protect me. That's what real love looks like. Grant never understood that, because he'd never felt it. My lawyer was a woman named Sandra Kowalski, 5'2", silver hair, reading glasses perpetually perched on her nose. She looked like someone's sweet grandmother. She was a shark in a cardigan. Sandra reviewed everything. The clinic documents, Molly's statement, the police findings, the affair evidence, the embezzlement records. When she finished, she looked up at me over those reading glasses and smiled. Your husband is facing fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement charges. The prenup infidelity clause works in your favor now because he's the one who's been cheating. And his little scheme to falsify medical records after the birth? That's a felony he was planning to commit. We have evidence of intent. She coordinated with the prosecutor. Molly gave a formal sworn statement to police. The embryologist cooperated in exchange for reduced charges. Grant's firm was quietly alerted about the missing funds. They began their own investigation and immediately froze his access to client accounts. A judge reviewed the evidence, found probable cause, issued an arrest warrant for fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. My lawyer called it a formality at this point. I called it the best piece of paper I'd ever seen in my life. 8.5 by 11 inches of pure karma. 6 weeks after that ultrasound appointment, I suggested to Grant that we throw a celebration, a baby moon party at my grandmother's estate. Both families, close friends, an afternoon garden gathering to celebrate the baby coming soon. His eyes lit up like Christmas morning. More witnesses to his devoted husband performance. More people who would feel sorry for him later when his wife was exposed as a cheater. More fuel for the sympathy he was planning to milk. That's a wonderful idea, he said, kissing my forehead in that gentle way that used to make me feel safe. Let me help plan everything. No. I patted his chest. You've been working so hard lately. All those late nights at the office. Let me handle the party. You just show up and enjoy it. He had no idea that my version of handling everything included police officers waiting in the guest house, my lawyer stationed near the bar, Derek Sykes ready to testify, every piece of evidence organized in folders, and his own parents about to learn exactly who their son really was. The party was scheduled for Saturday. Grant spent that morning in the bathroom practicing expressions in the mirror, adjusting his tie, rehearsing his excited father smile. I watched him through the crack in the door. This man I'd shared a bed with for 3 years. This man I'd trusted with my future, my family, my heart. He thought he was walking into his crowning achievement. He had no idea he was walking into his own funeral, the Wilson family estate in late spring. My grandmother's gardens in full bloom, 50 years of careful cultivation bursting with color, white tents on the back lawn, champagne chilling in silver buckets, flowers arranged on every table, a string quartet playing softly near the rose bushes, 50 guests milling about in their Sunday best, family, friends, colleagues. Grant's parents had driven up from Maryland, so proud of their successful son and his beautiful pregnant wife. My grandmother would have loved this party. She also would have seen through Grant in about 30 seconds flat. But that's grandmother wisdom for you. The older generation has a radar for phonies that the rest of us have to develop the hard way. Grant was in his absolute element, working the crowd like a politician at a fundraiser. Handshakes, backslaps, that charming laugh he'd perfected over years of practice. His hand kept finding my belly for photos. Every time someone pointed a camera, there he was, the devoted father-to-be, gazing at me with what looked like adoration. He was so good at pretending to be human, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The feeling lasted approximately 3 seconds before I remembered the $50,000 he'd spent trying to destroy my life. Sympathy evaporated pretty quickly after that. Grant's mother kept dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. I always knew he'd make a wonderful father, she told anyone who would listen. Such a good boy, such a caring husband. His father walked around shaking hands, chest puffed out, proud of the family Grant was supposedly building, the legacy continuing. The Mercer name carried forward. My own mother stood near the dessert table, watching Grant with the patient expression of a cat observing a mouse that doesn't know it's trapped. She caught my eye across the lawn and raised her champagne glass slightly. Almost time. Around 3 o'clock, Grant did exactly what I knew he would do. He'd been dropping hints for weeks about wanting to celebrate fatherhood with a DNA test, frame the results in the nursery, proof of their bond. So romantic, so meaningful, so completely staged. At the party, he brought it up again. loudly, making sure plenty of people could hear. "You know what we should do, honey?" He pulled me close, arm around my waist, playing to the crowd. "I've been thinking. Let's get one of those DNA test kits. We can frame the results for the nursery. Proof that daddy and baby are connected forever. Wouldn't that be special?" Several guests made awe sounds. His mother dabbed her eyes again. I pretended to hesitate. "Oh, I don't know. That seems like a lot of trouble." "Come on, it'll be amazing. We could even open the results right here, right now. Make it part of the celebration. What do you think, everyone?" Encouraging murmurs from the crowd. Someone said, "How sweet." Someone else mentioned they wished their husband was that thoughtful. Well, I looked around, playing the shy wife. If everyone thinks it's a good idea... Grant was practically glowing. This was his moment. The trap he'd spent over a year building was about to snap shut. He could already taste my money, my humiliation, my destruction. He just didn't realize whose neck was in the trap. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. I love hearing your thoughts in the comments. Now let's get to what you've been waiting for. Instead of pulling out a DNA kit, I walked toward the small platform we'd set up near the fountain, the one meant for toasts and speeches. I picked up the microphone. Grant smiled up at me from the crowd, champagne in hand. He was already rehearsing his shocked, devastated face, practicing the tears he'd cry when the truth came out about his cheating wife. "Thank you all for coming today," I said, my voice carrying across the lawn. "This party is supposed to be about celebration, about family, about truth." I found Grant's eyes in the crowd. "My husband said he wanted to reveal something special today, so I'm going to help him do exactly that." His smile flickered, just for a second, the first crack in his performance. I reached under the podium and pulled out a folder. 3 months ago, I learned something about my husband that changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. I want to share it with all of you today because Grant is right. This should be about truth. Grant's smile was frozen now. His champagne glass had stopped halfway to his lips. Grant and I struggled with fertility. His diagnosis meant natural conception was impossible for us. So we did IVF at a clinic he chose. I held up the first document. These are the records from that clinic. The original records, before anyone had a chance to alter them. I let that word hang in the air. Original. Grant's face went pale. These records show that my husband bribed 2 clinic employees to switch his sperm sample with donor sperm. He paid $30,000 to a nurse. He paid the embryologist. And he paid $15,000 to a young man named Derek Sykes. I gestured toward the edge of the crowd. Derek stepped forward, a 28-year-old grad student who'd thought he was helping an infertile couple, not participating in fraud. To provide the sperm that was used to conceive my child, without my knowledge, without my consent. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Grant's mother grabbed his father's arm. Someone dropped a champagne glass and it shattered on the patio stones. My husband's plan was simple, I continued. Wait until our child was born, demand a DNA test, and when the results proved he wasn't the biological father, which he already knew would happen, he would accuse me of having an affair. I held up more documents. Our prenup has an infidelity clause. If I had supposedly cheated, I would owe him $500,000. He could sue for additional damages. He could destroy my reputation. He could take everything my grandmother left me and walk away. Grant found his voice. It came out strangled, desperate. "Daphne, honey, this is insane. You're confused. It's the pregnancy, the hormones. You're not thinking clearly. I'm not finished." My voice was ice. The crowd went silent. In addition to bribing the fertility clinic, my husband embezzled approximately $50,000 from his clients at his firm to fund this scheme. I looked at a man standing near the bar, Grant's boss, who'd been quietly invited. His firm is now aware and investigating. Grant's boss set down his drink. His face said everything. My husband also has $180,000 in gambling debts, money he owes to people who don't take late payments kindly. And for the past 8 months, I pulled out the photographs. Nothing explicit, just romantic enough to leave no doubt. He's been having an affair with his assistant. Grant's mother made a sound like she'd been punched in the stomach. I displayed the photos, restaurant dinners, hotel entrances, the kind of evidence that removes all possibility of denial. This wasn't even his first attempt, I added, 5 years ago in Boston, he targeted another woman with family money. That relationship ended when she discovered financial irregularities. She's provided a statement to investigators and is prepared to testify. Grant's champagne glass slipped from his fingers. It hit the stone patio and exploded, champagne spraying across his expensive shoes. Those are lies, he stammered. She's making this up. She's mentally unstable. The pregnancy has affected her mind. Grant, his own mother's voice cut through the noise, quiet but sharp enough to draw blood. Is any of this true? He turned to face her, opened his mouth to deny everything. Nothing came out. Molly Brennan stepped forward from where she'd been standing near the guest house, pale but determined. I'm the nurse he bribed, she said. I have documentation of everything. I've already given my statement to police. Derek Sykes spoke up next. He paid me $15,000 and told me it was a private arrangement. I had no idea I was part of a fraud until Mrs. Wilson's investigator contacted me last month. Grant looked around wildly at the faces of people who'd been laughing with him 10 minutes ago. His colleagues, his family, the society friends he'd worked so hard to impress. Everyone was staring at him like he was something rotting they just discovered on their shoe. Then 2 police officers stepped out from the guest house, walking calmly across the lawn. Grant Mercer. The first officer's voice was professionally neutral. You're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. They handcuffed him right there, in front of everyone. His mother was sobbing now. His father refused to look at him, staring at the ground like he wished it would open up and swallow him. As they walked him toward the police car, Grant tried one last time, one final manipulation. Daphne, please. His voice cracked. We can work this out. I made mistakes, but I love you. I've always loved you. Don't do this. Think about our baby. Think about our family. I looked at him. Really looked. At the man I'd shared my life with for 3 years. The man I defended to my own mother. The man who'd stood at an altar and promised to love and protect me while calculating how much he could steal. You're absolutely right, Grant, I said. We just worked it out. They put him in the back of the police car. I watched it drive away down the long gravel path, past the gardens my grandmother had planted half a century ago, through the iron gates of the property Grant had wanted so desperately to own. 50 guests stood in absolute silence. Then my mother walked up and put her arm around my shoulders. I'm proud of you, she said quietly. Your grandmother would be too. And for the first time in months, I took a full breath. Grant was denied bail. Flight risk, the judge said. Between his gambling debts and the people he owed money to, there was too much chance he'd disappear. Those gambling creditors got very interested very quickly once the arrest made the news. They'd been patient while Grant had a wealthy wife. That patience evaporated the moment they realized the money train had derailed. His affair partner, the assistant he'd been sneaking around with for 8 months, resigned from his firm the morning after the party. Didn't even clean out her desk. Just sent an email and vanished. She didn't wait for the handcuffs to click shut before she ran. I've seen rats leave sinking ships with more loyalty. At least rats have the decency to look back once. Grant's firm completed their internal investigation within 2 weeks. $53,000 confirmed missing. They filed their own criminal charges. The woman from Boston, Caroline Ashford, came forward publicly once she heard about the arrest. She'd spent 5 years feeling stupid for falling for his act, too embarrassed to pursue justice. She wasn't embarrassed anymore. Her statement added another layer to the case prosecutors were building. The divorce was finalized in record time. Grant's lawyer tried to negotiate, but there was nothing to negotiate with. The prenup's infidelity clause, the one Grant had been planning to weaponize against me, worked in my favor now. He was the one who'd been unfaithful for 8 months. He owed me, not the other way around. Not that he had anything to give. Every asset he claimed to own was either borrowed, stolen, or imaginary. The criminal case moved quickly. Molly Brennan testified. The embryologist cooperated fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. Derek Sykes provided his statement. The paper trail Grant thought he'd hidden wasn't hidden at all. Fraud, conspiracy, embezzlement. Each charge stuck. Each charge carried years. His parents stopped coming to court after the first week. His father released a statement saying Grant had made choices that no parent can defend. His mother checked into a facility for exhaustion, which is what wealthy people call it when they can't face reality. Grant Mercer, who had walked into my life 4 years ago with such careful charm, would spend the next several years in prison. When he eventually got out, he'd have nothing. No money, no career, no family willing to acknowledge him, no future targets who wouldn't find his criminal record with a simple search of his name. The trap he'd built so patiently and so carefully had snapped shut on his own neck. My baby was born 4 months after the party, healthy, perfect, absolutely innocent in everything that had happened. Some people asked if I was going to contact Derek Sykes, include him somehow. I thought about it. But Derek was a 28-year-old grad student who'd made a dumb decision for money he desperately needed. He wasn't ready to be a father. He didn't want to be, and I didn't need him to be. My child would have me, would have my mother, finally back in my life where she belonged, would have the entire Wilson family, the legacy my grandmother built over decades of love and work. That was more than enough. That was everything. I learned something through all of this. Family isn't about DNA. It's not about blood tests or biology or genetic matches on a chart. Family is about who shows up, who stays, who chooses you every single day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. My mother chose me when I didn't deserve it. I chose my baby when the circumstances were complicated. That's what family actually means. My mother and I had lunch every week now, making up for 2 lost years, one conversation at a time. She never said, "I told you so." Not once. Finally, I asked her why. She set down her coffee cup and smiled. Because watching you take down that man was more satisfying than any 4 words could ever be. I laughed. First real laugh in what felt like forever. 3 weeks after the party. Early morning. I sat in my grandmother's kitchen, my kitchen now, in the house Grant had coveted so desperately. Sunlight poured through windows that had watched 4 generations of Wilson women live their lives, the same windows my grandmother had looked through while drinking her morning tea 50 years ago. I made myself a cup of chamomile, her recipe, her favorite brand. Some traditions are worth keeping. My phone buzzed on the counter. Text from my mother, "Lunch tomorrow." I smiled and typed back, "Always." Outside, the gardens were in full bloom. The roses my grandmother planted when she was a young bride, the hydrangeas she added when my mother was born, the lavender border I'd helped her install when I was 10 years old, my small hands patting dirt around each seedling while she told me stories about our family. I put my hand on my belly, felt the baby move. Grant Mercer had tried to take everything from me, my money, my reputation, my future, my peace. All he actually did was show me exactly how strong I'd always been. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for karma to arrive. I was lucky. I got to deliver mine in person, with documentation, in front of 50 witnesses. My grandmother used to say that Wilson women don't break. We bend, we adapt, we survive. And when someone tries to burn us down, we rise from the ashes and build something better. Grant thought he married an easy target. He married a Wilson. And now he had plenty of time in a prison cell to think about that mistake. Thank you so much for watching. More of my most gripping stories are already on your screen. Click one now and don't miss the best part. You will love it. See you in the next story.